May 1849. The British Empire is grappled by a peculiar addiction. After the culmination of the First Opium War, Great Britain and the Qing Empire are locked in a vicious trade struggle. Weakened and defeated, Emperor Daoguang was forced to open his gates. And inside those gates was a false gardener on a mission to steal a 2,000-year-old secret. A secret so valuable it would collapse a 200-year-old global monopoly, and so big it would carve a wound on China that would take a century to heal. This is the story of how a single and daring botanist managed to dethrone a 2,000-year-old empire. This is the story of Robert Fortune. So, how did a single botanist exactly break the Qing Empire? And, more importantly, how did this heist rewrite the world's history? To understand why a gardener was chosen for this mission, we have to go back. 1848. London, England. The East India Company, the largest corporation on the planet, was heading toward a disaster so imminent it threatened to collapse the British nation. It wasn't a disaster of politics or war, but a ticking time bomb of supply and demand. You see, the citizens of Britain had become addicted. They were addicted to a plant called Camellia sinensis, otherwise known as tea. Since its introduction in the early 1600s, tea had transformed from a luxury for the elite to becoming a national necessity, even for the working class. But there was just one problem. This plant is a foreigner. It was neither grown nor manufactured on British soil. It came from one place, and one place alone: the Middle Kingdom, the Empire of China. Following its recent wars with its European neighbors, the British Empire's silver reserve has dropped to a critical low. And from 1780 to 1840, the British demand for Chinese tea has risen to an all-time high. You see, China would not accept any payment for these tea leaves except for one thing. Yes, silver, the one the British was running out low of. In short, in order to sustain this tea addiction, Britain was literally funneling its entire wealth to China in exchange for dried leaves. And in 1839, to fix this trade deficit, the empire and the company even tried a war. The First Opium War, to force China's hand to open its port to claw back its silver in exchange for opium. But winning this war didn't cauterize the silver bleed. China still had its tea, and the British its addiction. Now, you might ask, why not plant the tea themselves? You see, manufacturing tea isn't as intuitive as it sounds. In fact, it isn't as simple as drying a leaf and boiling it in water. The tea-making process, specifically by the Chinese, is a 2,000-year-old, heavily guarded state secret. The British didn't know how to grow the plant, nor how to process it. It was a technology beyond the Victorian understanding at the time. So, the East India Company, the empire's most powerful proprietor, had no choice. It was losing all of its silver reserve, and if this situation continued, the British Empire will follow. They realized they needed a permanent solution. They decided they weren't going to buy tea anymore. They were going to steal everything. But how do you steal a 2,000-year-old secret from a country that executes anyone who tries? Following the end of the Opium War, Britain and China signed the Treaty of Nanking, a treaty allowing British entry into Chinese ports, but with an explicit, lethal limitation. Foreigners were strictly prohibited from venturing more than 15 kilometers away from these designated areas. Any illegal entry beyond this limit meant a death sentence. So, for this corporate heist to work, the East India Company couldn't send an army. They needed a battalion compressed into one. They approached a man, and his name, Robert Fortune. So, who exactly was Robert Fortune, and why did the company choose him? Fortune was a gardener, but he wasn't just a simple gardener. He was a 35-year-old Scottish botanist and a seasoned plant hunter who had previously explored restricted coastal areas of China. 5 years ago, under the guidance of Royal Horticultural Society, he knew the language, the culture, and the terrain. But this time, his job wasn't to record plants for science. The order from the company was specific. Besides the collection of tea seeds and plants, You will also be required to obtain every information as to the different modes of cultivation and preparation of the leaf. In other words, steal the plants and steal the whole process. September 1848. Shanghai, China. After 2 grueling months of voyage filled with typhoons and pirate attacks, Fortune successfully landed at the port of Shanghai. To enter the Forbidden Kingdom, he had to perform another one of his secret skills. You see, Robert wasn't just an expert botanist, he was also a capable impersonator, having previously learned the mannerisms and social etiquette of the empire. He proceeded to shave his head to a smooth shine, leaving just enough to attach a queue, a long braided Chinese hairpiece. And then he switched his clothes and donned the silk robes of a Mandarin official. Accompanied by a Chinese partner named Wang, they first traveled deep into Hongzhou. And under the guise of being a rich Chinese merchant, Fortune entered a green tea plantation and learned the complete tea processing secret. He learned that tea wasn't just dried leaves, but a multi-step technology of drying, heating, and rolling, repeated until the essence of the leaves were perfectly extracted. Then, they headed to Anhui province, where they finally acquired the tea trees and seeds. By January 1849, he sent 13,000 seedlings ahead to Calcutta. Almost half a year later, it seemed that the heist was a success. Or was it? Months later, he received word from India. Out of those 13,000, only 80 had survived. The rest had turned into fungus-filled mush, and those remaining 80, they were on the verge of death. While reading the reports, Fortune learned a heartbreaking truth. An officer had broken the containers, exposing the delicate plants to the open air, killing them. All of Fortune's risk, the disguise, the mountain treks, the death threats, had resulted to nothing but a box of rot. But why was sea travel so lethal? You see, transporting plants across oceans, especially on humid hot seas, like the South China Sea and Indian Ocean, is a delicate, if not deadly process for plants. Strong waves and storms shakes the cargoes, physically bruising them, and the delicate sun exposure must be maintained for months in order for the plant to survive. But the real plant killer? A chemical process called osmotic stress. A process whereby heavy salt-filled air acts like a vacuum, pulling the moisture out of the plant's cells, effectively killing them through dehydration. But the company knew this, and this is the exact reason they chose Fortune for this job. He wasn't your regular spy, he is a man of science, and a man of sheer dedication. In the month of May, 1849, he went back into the heart of the Wuyi Mountains to gather a second, superior batch of seeds. And this time, he precisely knew exactly what went wrong, and made 2 critical adjustments. First, he will personally accompany and adjust the Wardian cases. Named after the scientist Dr. Nathaniel Ward, these are sealed greenhouse boxes made of glass and wood. It functions like this. At daytime, its glass roof allows sunlight to pass through and vaporize fresh liquid water inside. And at nighttime, the same water condense and rain back down, basically acting as an enclosed continuous water cycle loop and a shield against salty ocean moisture. Second, he realized the first batch of plants he sent were treated like luggage when they should have been treated like incubators. Fortune adjusted by sending only seeds, not full-grown plants, which are most susceptible to scorching ocean heat, while also controlling the plant's environment by using native soil and leaf mold to retain and control moisture. Thus, on February 1851, the ship pulled out of Shanghai, carrying 20,000 seedlings. The real test is about to begin. For weeks, he watched the Wardian cases like a hawk, constantly adjusting their position by moving them to catch the perfect amount of sunlight. Day by day, whether it was sunny or raining, he would observe the case's moisture levels and check their edges for leaks. He knew that a single crack or a week of neglect wouldn't just kill the tea plants, it would render 3 years of deception, disguise, and danger completely worthless. And finally, after a month of travel, the ship docked in Calcutta. The result was out. When he finally cracked the iron seals in India, the seeds-laden soil had turned into thousands of healthy green sprouts. The heist was finally complete. Now, you might be asking, how did this single heist collapse the Chinese economy? Following the success of this heist, the seedlings were planted in the British-controlled Himalayan foothills of Darjeeling and Assam. Within just a couple of decades, the 2,000-year-old monopoly of China was shattered. And why was it so fast? You see, Fortune not only took notes, plants and seeds with him, but also something more. He also brought dozens of Chinese tea experts with him, who hastened up the process of technical knowledge transfer. In the following 100 years, the global market shifted forever. The price of tea plummeted, as it became a mass-produced commodity. For China, it was a death blow. It deepened the century of humiliation already underway. The Qing dynasty watched its wealth evaporate, as the East India Company seized control of the industry it had dominated for centuries, thus completely reversing the silver drain. Without the tea revenue to fund their military and infrastructure, the Chinese economy went into a tailspin that would take over 100 years to recover. As for Robert Fortune, he returned home as a wealthy man spending his final days in his own private garden, perhaps unaware that his walk through the mountains had rewritten the fate of two empires. His name eventually faded in history books. And as for the British, they finally had their cup of tea. That is it, the mystery of the gardener turned spy. No armies followed him, no crowns nor kings were stolen. Only secrets and seeds. He moved through the crowds and mountains, unnoticed, unstoppable. And with a single bloom, the map was quietly redrawn. The world barely saw him coming, and perhaps that was the point. Not a hero, nor a soldier, just a botanist whose curiosity collapsed empires. This file is closed, for now, but not forgotten. Thank you for watching. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you want to investigate some more curiosities, subscribe, so we can unfold more stories and unravel the mysterious, the bizarre, and the untold.